My name is Emily, and I am 38 years old. Tonight, I am sitting alone in my childhood home's grand living room. My parents just announced they have rewritten their will, and they have cut me off completely. My sister, their golden child, smiles proudly as they say, Emily has never been a real part of this family's future. Those words hit me like a cold wave. But they do not know the truth. They do not know about the company I built quietly over the years, the company now worth millions. In a few moments, I will show them what they have lost. Before we go back to where it all began, I want to ask you, where are you listening from? If this story touches your heart, please subscribe. Because the journey I am about to share is one of betrayal, strength, and finally the power to rewrite my own story. My name is Emily, and I have always tried to be the good daughter. I grew up in a family that believed success meant following a certain path. My parents wanted me to become a doctor or a lawyer, something that looked impressive on paper. Instead, I chose a different road. I worked quietly in technology, building small projects and helping companies grow. To my family, it was never a real job. It was just a hobby, something I did for fun but could not take seriously. Since I was a child, I watched my sister receive praise for every achievement. She was the golden child. Straight A's, a full scholarship to a top university, and a job at a prestigious law firm. My parents told stories about her proudly at every family gathering. Me? I was the one who kept the house clean, helped with chores, and never made waves. I was the responsible one who did not ask for much. At family dinners, I learned to keep my accomplishments small and quiet. When I shared news about a new client or a successful project, my parents would nod politely, but quickly shift the conversation back to my sister. That is nice, Emily, they would say. But Sarah has started a new case that will change her career forever. The words stung, but I smiled. I did not want to cause problems. I worked long hours, often late into the night. I believed in my work even if my family did not. I bought my own apartment with the money I earned. I paid for my own insurance and saved every penny I could. My parents never asked if I needed help. They assumed I was fine because I never complained. Sometimes I wondered if they saw me at all. I was the daughter who did not fit their expectations. I was not loud or demanding. I did not wear fancy clothes or drive a luxury car. I was quiet, simple, and hardworking. I told myself that one day they would understand. One day, they would be proud of me. My sister was always the center of attention. At birthdays, weddings, and holidays, the spotlight was on her. I watched as my parents gave her gifts and praise while I received polite smiles. It was a pattern that repeated itself every year, every event, and every family moment. I loved my family, but I also felt invisible. It was a feeling I carried quietly, like a secret burden. I told myself that love should be unconditional. I told myself that family means support, no matter what. But deep down, I knew that my family's love came with conditions. Despite everything, I never stopped believing in myself. I knew my work mattered. I knew that I was building something important, even if no one else could see it yet. My company was small, and it was not famous, but it was mine. And it was growing every day. This was my life. Quiet, steady, and unnoticed. I was the good daughter who did not ask for much. But that was about to change. Growing up, I was used to being the smaller part of the family story. It was not always easy to explain, but there were moments that stuck with me, moments that showed me, in very clear ways, that I was not the one my family believed in. 1. Christmas. When I was about 10 years old, we all gathered at my grandparents' house. My sister Sarah had just won a big award at school. Everyone was excited. The adults kept talking about her achievement, asking questions, praising her intelligence. I had received a small prize for writing a poem at school, but no one mentioned it. My parents barely looked at me. I remember feeling invisible in that room filled with people I loved. The smiles they gave me were polite but empty. Meanwhile, Sarah was glowing in the center of attention. That evening, I asked my mother why she never talked about my poem. She said, "It is not the same as Sarah's award. Yours is nice, but not important." I did not understand why my accomplishment was less valuable. But I learned then that my family had different standards for me. Another time. At my high school graduation, my family was there but distracted. Sarah had just started law school. And the conversation was all about her future. My own speech was short, and few people listened closely. I tried to hide my disappointment because I did not want to make anyone uncomfortable. But inside, it hurt to be overlooked on a day I had worked so hard for. During family dinners, the pattern repeated again and again. I would share stories about my projects at work or the challenges I faced, hoping for some encouragement. Instead, I heard phrases like, "That is nice, Emily, but you should think about getting a real job." My parents often joked that technology was not a stable career, as if my passion was something silly and temporary. Sarah's future was described in terms of power and respect. Mine was dismissed as uncertain and small. These moments added up. They shaped my sense of self. I felt like the child who was always not enough in the eyes of my family. I was not smart enough, not successful enough, not important enough. I became used to hiding my feelings and staying quiet. At one point, I tried to talk to my mother about how I felt. I said, "I work hard, I have goals. Why do you treat my work like it does not matter?" She shook her head and said, "You are too sensitive, Emily. We just want the best for you. Sarah's path is the best path." That answer left me feeling lost and alone. It was not just the words that hurt, but the way I was made to feel small in every conversation, every family event. I remember one holiday when my sister's fiancé arrived. The family's excitement was overwhelming. They asked me only polite questions and quickly moved on. Sarah was the one they wanted to impress. I sat quietly, pretending not to notice. Looking back, I see how these small moments were pieces of a bigger pattern. My family had decided who I was, and it was not the person I wanted to be. They did not believe in my dreams or my work. They believed only in the safe, conventional path that Sarah represented. Despite this, I never stopped trying. I was determined to prove to myself, if not to them, that I could succeed on my own terms. But the constant dismissal made me doubt myself sometimes. It was hard not to feel broken when your own family treats you like you do not belong. Even my closest friends noticed the difference. They told me, "You are amazing, Emily. Do not let your family's opinions shape your worth." But it was hard to hear that and still carry the weight of their coldness. As I moved into adulthood, I began to build a life that was separate from my family's expectations. I worked late nights on my technology projects. I read books and learned everything I could about business. I kept a journal where I wrote about my dreams and fears. But I never told my family about this secret world. They would have dismissed it immediately. Every now and then, my sister would call and ask for advice or help. I gave it willingly because I loved her, but inside, I felt the sting of being needed only when convenient. I wondered if she understood how she was treated as the favorite and how I was left in the shadows when my parents planned family vacations or events. I was often the one to organize details quietly behind the scenes. I made sure everyone was comfortable and happy, even if no one thanked me. I was the invisible helper, the good daughter who kept peace but received little recognition. Through all of this, I held on to one secret hope. One day they would see me. They would understand that I was more than the quiet, invisible child. I hoped they would realize that I had a strength they never noticed, but deep down, I worried that hope was just a dream. While my family focused on appearances and the paths they thought mattered, I was quietly building something of my own. It was not a flashy company or a name anyone in my family knew. Instead, it was a small but growing technology business that I started from scratch. I worked in silence, careful not to draw attention, because I knew my family would never believe in me otherwise. After university, I found a job in a small tech firm. I learned everything I could about coding, marketing, and managing projects. At night, I worked on side projects, small websites, apps, and software tools for local businesses. These side jobs grew slowly, and I reinvested every penny back into the business. I kept detailed records and saved every contract, every invoice. It was my way of proving to myself that I was capable. For years, my parents thought I was just working a normal job. They believed I lived paycheck to paycheck, struggling like many young adults. They never asked for details, and I never volunteered them. I knew they would judge or dismiss what I was doing. So I kept my success hidden. I remember one winter evening when I received the first big contract for my company. It was with a mid-sized firm that wanted me to build an internal software system. The work was complex and demanding. I stayed up, late for months, coding, testing, and fixing problems. When the project was done, the client wrote me a letter thanking me for my dedication and skill. I kept that letter in a drawer, a secret trophy of my hard work. Over the years, my company grew slowly but steadily. I hired a few people, mostly freelancers, and expanded my services. I never took loans or outside investments. Every step was funded by the money I earned. I kept the business small by choice because I did not want to risk failure or attract unwanted attention. Despite the growth, I remained humble. I never flaunted my success. I did not buy expensive things or change my lifestyle. I lived simply, rented a small apartment, and saved money. I knew my family would never accept me if I showed off. So I stayed quiet and focused on my work. I also supported my family financially in secret. Over the years, I helped pay for repairs on the house, covered medical bills for my parents, and sent money to Sarah when she needed it. They never knew. If they had, I am sure they would have used that information against me. So I kept these actions hidden, like another secret strength. I learned to be very careful with money. I opened bank accounts in my own name and under the company. I kept the business records meticulously organized. I worked with a trusted accountant who never asked questions beyond the professional scope. Everything was legal and clean. I wanted no mistakes that could risk my independence. The most important secret was the purchase of a property. A few years ago, I bought a small but valuable building in the city's growing tech district. It was an investment for the future, a place where I planned to expand my company. The property was under my name alone. My family did not know about it. If they did, I feared they would want to share or try to control it. This building was more than just an asset. It was a symbol of everything I had built alone. It was proof that I was not the small, invisible daughter they believed me to be. It was my safety net and my future. Looking back, I realized how much strength it took to keep all of this hidden. I had to act like the good daughter they wanted on the outside while building a whole other life behind the scenes. Sometimes I felt lonely. Sometimes I doubted myself. But I never stopped. I also kept a personal journal where I recorded my feelings and plans. Writing helped me stay focused and sane. I wrote about my dreams of success, my fears of failure, and my hope that one day my family would see the real me. Yet, I also knew that hope was fragile. I had to be prepared for disappointment. For years, I guarded my secret like a treasure, waiting for the right time to reveal it, or for the day I would not need to reveal it at all. My company was still small compared to the giants in the industry, but it was worth a few $1 million. I had a steady stream of clients and a team I trusted. I had built something real and lasting, with my own hands and mind. While my family praised Sarah's conventional success, I was quietly becoming independent and powerful in my own way. I had financial freedom, and that freedom gave me confidence I had never felt before. I knew that if my family ever discovered my secret, it would change everything. It could make them jealous, angry, or greedy. Or it could force them to respect me, finally, but for now, I kept the secret safe. I told no one, not even Sarah. It was my strength, my shield, and my future. This secret was the foundation of what was to come. The day they cut me off, they would discover that I was no longer the small, quiet daughter. They would learn that I had the power to stand on my own and more. The day was approaching, the family gathering I had been quietly dreading for weeks. It was my parents' 40th wedding anniversary, and the whole family was expected to be there. My parents wanted a big celebration, a fancy dinner at one of the city's finest restaurants. Invitations were sent out and plans were made. My sister was already talking about how perfect everything would be from the moment the invitation arrived. I felt a knot in my stomach. I knew that the night would not be just a celebration. It would be a test of who I was in their eyes. I was nervous, but I also felt obligated to go. After all, they were my parents. I wanted to believe that maybe this time things would be different. As the days passed, the tension grew. I heard snippets of conversations from my family that made my heart sink. My mother called me twice, asking about the menu and what I would. Where her tone was polite but distant. She made comments about how Sarah was the star of the evening, and that I should not worry too much about attention. At work. I found it hard to focus. My mind kept returning to the dinner. Would they bring up my job? Would they ignore me like always? Or worse, would they use the occasion to make me feel small again? My sister Sarah called me one afternoon. Her voice was cheerful but sharp underneath. Emily, Mom and Dad expect you to help with the decorations. You are good at organizing things, right? It would be nice if you could take charge. I agreed. But inside, I felt a familiar pang. I was once again being given the role of the helper. The behind-the-scenes person. During the week before the dinner, I found myself reviewing every detail. I wanted to do my best. I wanted to make sure nothing went wrong. I bought flowers, planned the seating arrangements, and even prepared a small speech to thank my parents for everything. I hoped my words would show that I cared, even if they had never shown me the same kindness. The day of the gathering arrived. I dressed carefully, choosing a simple but elegant dress. I did not want to stand out too much, but I wanted to feel confident. When I arrived at the restaurant, the atmosphere was already full of energy. My family was there, surrounded by friends and relatives. Sarah was glowing, smiling at everyone, and soaking in the attention. At first, I tried to enjoy the evening. I greeted old relatives and answered questions politely. But as the dinner began, I noticed how the attention quickly turned away from me. The conversations focused on Sarah's latest promotion and upcoming wedding plans. My contributions were met with polite nods but no real interest. When it was time for my speech, I stood up nervously. I spoke slowly and clearly, thanking my parents for their love and support. I talked about how family meant everything to me, even when it was hard. I hoped my words would touch them, but I saw only polite smiles and quick glances exchanged between my parents and sister. Later, when the dessert arrived, my mother leaned toward me and said quietly, "Emily, you do not have to worry about money like we do. Sarah will take care of everything." The words stung deeply. It was a reminder that I was seen as less, as someone who would never have a place in the family's true future. I kept my smile, but inside I was hurting. I wondered if they would ever understand how hard I had worked to build my life. I wondered if they even cared. As the evening drew to a close, I helped with the cleanup. I stayed behind to make sure everything was in order. My parents and sister left early, already planning their next celebration without me. That night, I sat alone in my apartment and reflected on the evening. The family gathering had been what I expected, full of smiles but lacking warmth. It was a reminder that the roles I had played in my family were still the same. I was the quiet daughter, the helper, the one who was not seen, but something inside me was changing. I was tired of being small. I was tired of being overlooked and dismissed. The gathering had shown me how little had changed, and how much I was ready to change things. The night ended with a feeling of resolve. I would no longer wait for my family's approval or recognition. I would no longer accept being treated as less. I was ready to take control of my own story, no matter what it cost. The night of the anniversary dinner still lingered in my mind when the real shock arrived. I never expected the betrayal that would come so suddenly, and yet, once it happened, nothing was the same again. A few days after the celebration, my parents called me to their house. I felt nervous but hopeful. Maybe they wanted to talk, to make peace, or at least to acknowledge me properly. When I arrived, the tension in the air was thick. My sister was already there, her smile polite, but guarded. My parents sat me down with a seriousness I had never seen before. They handed me a thick envelope. It was the new version of their will. My heart sank as I opened it. I read the pages carefully, but the words blurred with shock and disbelief. They had cut me off completely. Not a single penny, no property, no inheritance, nothing. The entire estate was left to Sarah and a few distant relatives. I was simply erased. I looked up, voice shaking. Why? Why would you do this? My mother's eyes were cold. We did what was best for the family. You have never been part of that. Your life has been separate, and frankly disappointing. My sister smiled, leaning forward. You owe us, Emily. The family supported you when you were starting out. We paid for things you do not even remember. It is only fair that Sarah gets what she earned. I could not believe the cruelty in their words. Years of silent support, of hidden help, erased in an instant. I tried to explain about my company, the property I had bought, the money I had quietly sent to help them. But they shook their heads. Uninterested. Then came the worst part. My father said, "You live like a pauper anyway. This money would be wasted on you. Sarah knows how to handle real wealth. This is what families do." I felt my world crack. The family that was supposed to love me had betrayed me in the deepest way. It was not just about money. It was about respect, about recognition, about the trust they destroyed. I left their house that day feeling smaller than ever. But beneath the hurt, a fire was starting to burn. This betrayal was a turning point. They thought they could break me with words and empty promises. They were wrong. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, replaying the conversation. I wrote down every word, every feeling. I realized that I could no longer stay silent or invisible. They had made a grave mistake, underestimating me, my strength, and the life I had built. This was the moment when everything changed. After the shock of the rewritten will and the betrayal, the family's true colors became impossible to ignore. Their sense of entitlement was overwhelming. It was as if I was no longer a person, but a resource, something to be used, controlled, or dismissed at their convenience. The days after that meeting were filled with cold conversations and cruel words. My parents, my sister, and even some distant relatives began to act as if I owed them everything. They spoke openly about what I should do, what I owed to the family, and how my life choices had made me undeserving of respect or support. One afternoon, my mother called me with a voice that was both sharp and weary. "Emily, you have to understand. The family has needs. You have taken so much over the years, even if you do not realize it. It is time to pay your debt." I asked her what debt she meant, but she laughed bitterly. The kind that cannot be measured in money alone. At a family dinner not long after, my sister confronted me directly. Her eyes cold and hard, she said, "You live like a pauper anyway. Why would anyone want to give you a fortune? You have never fit in with us. This money is for people who know their place." Her words hit me like a punch in the stomach. It was not just about money, it was about rejection. About being told I was not good enough. My father echoed similar sentiments. This is what families do. We protect what matters. You chose your path, Emily. You cannot expect us to support it forever. His voice was calm, but beneath it was an unmistakable edge of anger and disappointment. Sometimes they sent messages that were less direct but just as painful. "We are disappointed," one text read. "You owe us more respect and gratitude." Another message said, "The family comes first. You are forgetting who helped you." I realized they saw me as a problem, a burden, and a disappointment. They did not see the years of silent support I had given or the company I had built alone. They did not see the sacrifices I had made to keep peace or the love I still held for them. Despite everything, but I also saw something new in their demands: desperation. They were clinging to a story that made them feel secure, a story where they controlled the money, the power, and the family legacy. My existence, my success threatened that story. Each time they said, "You owe us," I felt a mix of anger and sadness. How could people who were supposed to love me act as if I was their debtor? How could they erase my efforts and identity with such ease? At first, I tried to explain myself. I told them about the company, the property, the secret, financial support, but they refused to listen. They shut me down, telling me I was being selfish or ungrateful. It was clear that they wanted to keep me in the role of the small daughter, not as an equal. Their cruelty was exhausting. But beneath it all, it strengthened my resolve. I knew that I did not owe them anything except respect, but only if they gave it in return. I knew that the real family I belonged to would be the one I chose, not the one that demanded control. The words "you owe us" became a trigger. Every time I heard them, I reminded myself that I owed no one my dignity. I owed no one the power to diminish me. That phrase marked the moment I stopped trying to please them. It was the moment I decided to take back control of my life, my money, and my story. They believed they could guilt me into submission. Instead, they awakened a new strength in me. Years of quiet hurt and disappointment finally came to a breaking point inside me. The betrayal, the cold words, the endless dismissal, it all piled up until I felt a shift deep within. I realized that I was done being sad or hoping for their approval. I was ready to act. Not out of anger or revenge, but with cold, calm resolve. For a long time, I had tried to explain myself, to make them see who I really was. I wanted to be the daughter they could be proud of. But every effort was met with dismissal or cruelty. I began to see that their refusal to accept me was not about love but control. They wanted to keep me small. That understanding was painful, but it was also freeing. If their love came with conditions that I could never meet, then I did not need their love. I needed respect. And if they would not give me that, I would create it for myself. The snap happened quietly one evening as I sat alone in my apartment. I was reading the messages from my family, the thinly veiled threats and demands. A strange calm washed over me. I put down my phone and took a deep breath. No more tears. No more silent suffering. I made a decision. I would no longer be the good daughter who stayed quiet and accepted less than she deserved. I would no longer let their opinions define my worth. I would take control of my life and protect myself from their cruelty. That night, I wrote a list. I wrote down everything they had taken from me, the respect, the support, the love they pretended to give. I wrote down everything I deserved and what I was willing to fight for. It was a moment of clarity that changed everything. I thought about the years of hidden work I had done. The company I had built from the ground up. The property I owned in. My name. The financial support I had given in secret. These were my strengths, my weapons in the battle ahead. I realized that I had underestimated myself. I had allowed their doubts and dismissals to shape how I saw myself, but now I knew my true value. I was not the invisible daughter. I was a woman with power, skill, and determination. The snap was not a sudden outburst of anger, but a steady, calm shift in my mindset. I stopped waiting for their acceptance and started planning my own future. I began to see myself as a person worthy of respect and love, no matter what my family said. That night, I also understood that setting boundaries was not selfish. It was necessary. I needed to protect my heart and my future. I could no longer let them hurt me without consequences. The feeling was like waking up from a long sleep. I saw my family clearly for the first time, not as they wanted me to see them, but as they truly were. I saw their fears, their selfishness, and their need for control. I did not hate them, but I no longer trusted them, and that was okay. Trust had to be earned, not demanded. In the days that followed, I began to prepare. I contacted my lawyer and started gathering all my documents. I made sure every detail of my business and property was secure. I reviewed my financial accounts and changed passwords. I was ready to protect myself. I also began to limit contact with my family. Their calls and messages became fewer as I stopped responding to manipulative words. I felt a strange peace in that silence. The snap was the turning point where I stopped being a victim and became a protector. I knew the road ahead would be difficult, but I was ready. I had spent years being small, but now I was growing strong. I was no longer afraid of what they thought. I was no longer bound by their rules. The snap gave me the courage to take back my life. After the moment I called the snap, I knew I had to act fast and smart. I could no longer afford to wait or hope things would change on their own. My family had crossed a line, and I had to protect myself, my company, my money, and my peace. It was time for decisive action. The first thing I did was call my lawyer. I had worked with her quietly for years, making sure everything in my business was in order. She understood my situation well. When I explained what had happened, the rewritten will, the cruel words, and the threats, she was firm but supportive. "We will make sure they cannot touch what is yours," she said. Her confidence gave me strength. Together, we began reviewing every document related to my company and property. I had all the paperwork carefully saved, but I wanted to be certain that nothing could be challenged. We confirmed that the building I had purchased was legally mine, under my name alone. There was no way they could claim it. Next, my lawyer helped me freeze all the family-related accounts where my money had been deposited for shared expenses. I had been quietly supporting my parents and sister for years, but now I saw that it was time to stop. The accounts were frozen to prevent any further unauthorized withdrawals or misuse. I also changed all the passwords for my business accounts, email, and bank accounts. I updated the security settings and set up alerts for any suspicious activity. It was a relief to know that I was in control of my finances again. With the legal protections in place, I took a step further. I filed a formal complaint with the police. The rewritten will, and the way my family had tried to cut me out without my consent, was not just cruel, it was potentially illegal. My lawyer advised me to document everything and keep copies of all messages, emails, and conversations related to the matter. This was not a decision I took lightly. It was painful to involve the authorities in my family dispute, but I understood that protecting myself was more important than pride or fear of confrontation. I also contacted the bank that held my business accounts. I informed them about the situation and requested extra security measures. They placed restrictions on the accounts so that no one but me and my lawyer could authorize transactions. The bank representatives were professional and helpful, giving me another layer of peace of mind. Throughout this process, I remained calm. I refused to respond to the angry texts and phone calls from my family. Their messages became desperate and manipulative, but I knew that engaging with them would only drain my energy. Instead, I focused on building my security and planning the next steps. I also took time to gather emotional support from close friends. I told a few trusted people what was happening, and their kindness reminded me that I was not alone. Their belief in me strengthened my resolve. One of the hardest parts was cutting off financial support. I had always seen it as part of being a good daughter, quietly helping where I could. But now I understood that my generosity had been taken for granted. I stopped sending money and explained to my lawyer that I would no longer assist my family financially. It was a difficult decision, but necessary for my well-being. I began planning for a meeting with my parents and sister. I wanted to confront the situation calmly and firmly, armed with the facts and legal protection. My goal was not revenge but clarity. I wanted them to understand that their actions had consequences, and that I was no longer willing to accept mistreatment. Before the meeting, I practiced what I would say. I wrote notes and rehearsed in front of the mirror. I reminded myself to stay composed and to speak my truth without anger or fear. On the day of the meeting, I arrived prepared. My lawyer was present as well, to ensure everything was clear and official. When I sat down with my family, I could see surprise in their eyes. They had expected me to be broken, quiet, and accepting. Instead, I was calm, confident, and firm. I presented the documents showing my ownership of the property and the company's finances. I explained the legal steps I had taken to protect my assets. I told them that their rewritten will was not valid without my consent, and that I would pursue legal action if necessary. The room was tense. My parents and sister tried to argue and interrupt, but I stood my ground. I spoke calmly and clearly, making it clear that I was no longer the small, invisible daughter. The meeting ended with a clear understanding. I was serious about protecting myself and my future. Afterwards, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I had taken control. I had used my intelligence, my preparation, and my quiet strength to protect what was mine. The decisive action was not easy. It required courage and patience. But it was necessary. I learned that sometimes the hardest step is to stand up for yourself, not with anger, but with calm determination. I knew that this was just the beginning. There would be challenges ahead, but I was ready. I had taken the first step toward reclaiming my life and my dignity. The moment I took decisive action, the consequences came swiftly, just as I had expected. My family did not respond with understanding or respect. Instead, panic and anger filled their every move. Their sense of control slipped away, and they reacted with desperation. Within days of freezing the joint accounts and securing my finances, the calls and messages began flooding my phone. My parents and sister bombarded me with angry texts, pleading calls, and even threats, but I did not respond. I had learned that silence was sometimes the strongest answer. Their frustration showed in every word. "Why are you doing this to us?" my mother demanded in one text. "You are tearing the family apart." Another message from my sister read, "You are selfish. We have done nothing but support you. You owe us." I ignored them all. Meanwhile, the practical consequences hit them hard. With the accounts frozen, payments they depended on stopped. Credit cards linked to those accounts were declined and bills went unpaid. My parents called me in panic, asking for explanations, but I stayed firm. I was no longer their bank or their safety net. Their plans began to unravel. They had relied on my quiet generosity for years, and suddenly that help was gone. The house repairs I had paid for had to be delayed. Medical bills went unpaid. Sarah's wedding plans faced delays because funds she expected were no longer available. I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. Sadness for how far my family had fallen into entitlement, and relief that finally boundaries were clear. I could not save them from themselves. Their desperation soon turned into attempts to manipulate me. They sent messages appealing to my guilt. "Think of the family," they wrote. "You are destroying our lives." But I refused to engage. I knew their words were designed to weaken my resolve. One day, my phone rang late at night. It was my father's voice, strained and pleading. "Emily, please, we can work this out. Just talk to us." I did not answer. Instead, I sat quietly and reminded myself why I was doing this. It was not to punish them, but to protect myself. Their refusal to respect me had forced my hand. Some relatives began to take sides. Some blamed me for the family conflict. Others whispered that I was being cruel. But I stood firm. I knew that standing up for myself was not cruelty. It was survival. The fallout was difficult, but necessary. My family had lived for years expecting me to be the invisible daughter who silently supported their lives. Now, they faced the reality of my independence. I also felt the weight of loneliness during this time. Cutting ties meant losing many familiar voices. But I reminded myself that true family was not just blood, it was respect. Love and support. As the weeks passed, the angry calls slowed. My family realized that I would not be pushed back into the old roles. They began to accept that things had changed. This quiet acceptance was not a victory for them, but for me. I had created space to live my own life, free from their demands. Through it all, I learned something important. Consequences are not punishment. They are a natural part of setting boundaries. Sometimes, when you protect yourself, others must face the truth of their actions. I felt stronger with every passing day. The price of standing up was high, but the cost of silence was even higher. Now, I was free to live without fear or shame. I had taken back my power, and nothing could take it away. In the midst of the storm that had become my family life, there was one person whose presence became my anchor. Her name was Lavra. We had been friends for years, but during this difficult time, her support grew from simple kindness into something much deeper and more powerful. She was more than a friend, she was an ally who helped me see my strength when I doubted myself. Lavra was the first person I told everything to after the betrayal and the harsh words from my family. I remember sitting in a small cafe, my hands trembling slightly as I explained the rewritten will, the coldness of my parents, and the endless demands that came with the phrase, "You owe us." She listened quietly, her eyes full of understanding. When I finished, she reached across the table and took my hand. "Emily, you did the right thing," she said softly. "You are not responsible for their mistakes or their cruelty. You have been strong all along." Her words felt like a balm to my wounded heart. For so long, I had been searching for validation from my family, but here was someone who believed in me unconditionally. That belief gave me courage. Lavra helped me in many practical ways too. She came with me to meetings with lawyers, helped organize my papers, and even attended family discussions. As a witness and moral support, having her by my side made the hardest moments more bearable. She never judged me or questioned my decisions. Instead, She offered gentle reminders that my feelings were valid and that setting boundaries was not just necessary but brave. One day, when I felt overwhelmed and ready to give up, Lavra said something that stayed with me. You are not alone. You are worthy of respect, and anyone who refuses to see that is not your family in the truest sense. Those words helped me redefine what family meant. I realized that blood relations do not guarantee love or support. Sometimes the real family we choose, friends, mentors, allies, is the family that truly holds us up. Lavra also encouraged me to celebrate my successes, no matter how small. She reminded me to recognize the hard work I had done to build my company and my independence. She celebrated every win with me. From signing a new client to securing the property in my name, her support helped me shift my focus from what I had lost with my biological family to what I had gained in strength and self-respect. She often said, "You are a fighter, Emily. The fact that you have come this far shows that nothing can stop you." With Laura's help, I also began attending support groups for people facing family conflicts. Hearing other stories helped me feel less isolated. I learned that I was not alone in facing betrayal and rejection from those who should love us most. Through these groups and Laura's friendship, I built a new network of people who understood me and stood beside me. In quiet moments, Lavra and I would talk about the future. She believed in my vision for my company and encouraged me to dream bigger. Her faith was infectious. One evening, after a long day of legal meetings and phone calls, she said, "You have already overcome so much. Your future is bright because you have chosen to fight for yourself." Those words stayed with me. They reminded me that the journey was not just about protecting what I had. It was about creating something new and better. The supportive ally I found in Lavra was a turning point. She helped me heal, believe, and grow. She showed me that love and loyalty could come from unexpected places. Looking back, I understand now that the greatest gift during my darkest times was not the money or the company, but the friendship that reminded me I was never truly alone, thanks to Lavra. I found strength when I was weak and hope when I was lost, and for that I will be forever grateful. Months had passed since the storm of family conflict, and life was beginning to settle into a new rhythm. It was quieter now because there were no challenges, but because I had found peace within myself. The chaos of betrayal and pain had given way to a calm I had never known before. My business continued to grow steadily. Without the weight of family drama holding me back, I poured my energy into my work with renewed passion. I hired a few more employees, people who believed in the vision as much as I did. We worked together like a small family, but this time, it was built on respect and trust. The building I had purchased years ago had become the heart of my company. It was more than just an office. It was a symbol of my independence. Walking through its doors every morning reminded me of how far I had come. Outside of work, I found comfort in the friends I had chosen. My circle was smaller but genuine. These people knew my story, supported my dreams, and celebrated my successes without jealousy or judgment. Lavra remained a constant presence, a reminder that true family is made of love and loyalty, not blood. Alone. I also found joy in simple things: quiet evenings reading a book, walks in the park, and dinners with friends who had become my chosen family. The peace I felt was deep and lasting. I did not hear from my parents or sister much anymore. Their silence was not always easy to bear, but it was part of the new boundaries I had set. I had accepted that some relationships might never heal, and that was okay. Instead, I focused on healing myself. Therapy helped me work through the wounds left by years of neglect and betrayal. I learned to love myself in ways I never had before. With this new strength, I began to explore parts of life I had put aside for too long. I traveled to places I had dreamed of visiting, took classes to improve my skills, and even started volunteering in community projects that mattered to me. The past was still there, but it no longer controlled me. I had learned to carry it without letting it weigh me down. One afternoon, I met with my closest friends in a small cafe to celebrate a major business milestone. As we raised our glasses, I felt a surge of gratitude. This was my real family, the people who chose to stand with me and support me. I thought about how different this life was from the one I had lived before. The difference was not just in the absence of conflict, but in the presence of peace and respect. I realized that success was sweeter when shared with people who truly cared. Sometimes I reflected on my parents and sister. I hoped they would find their own peace someday. But I no longer waited for their approval or love. My life was full and meaningful without it. This new and quiet life was not perfect. There were still hard days and moments of loneliness. But I faced them with strength and confidence. I had learned to set boundaries that protected my heart and my future. I had learned that sometimes walking away is the bravest thing you can do. Most of all, I had learned to believe in myself. No matter what others thought. As I looked around at the life I had built, I felt a deep sense of pride. Not because of money or possessions, but because I had chosen to live authentically. This was my victory, the quiet, steady triumph of being true to myself. Looking back on everything, I realize now that the real fortune I gained was not in money, property, or even success. It was something deeper, something that no one could take away from me. It was the self-respect I earned by standing up for myself and setting clear boundaries. For so long, I believed that family was defined by blood. I thought love and loyalty were automatic in those relationships. But my experience taught me otherwise. Family is not just who you are born to. It is who respects you, who values you, and who chooses to stand by your side. I remember the moment I understood this fully. It was a quiet morning in my apartment, years after the betrayal and all the struggles. I sat by the window, watching the sun rise, and felt a calm I had never known before. In that stillness, I knew I had found my true fortune. It was the courage to walk away from anyone who made me feel small. It was the strength to protect my heart, even when it meant losing the people I once loved. It was the peace of living a life built on my own terms, not theirs. The money and the company were important, but they were not the treasure. The real treasure was the freedom I had won, the freedom to be myself without apology or fear, I thought. Of all the times I had doubted myself, all the moments I wished for their approval, I realized that none of that mattered anymore. I was proud of the woman I had become. I had learned that setting boundaries was an act of love, not just for myself, but for everyone in my life. When we respect ourselves, we teach others how to treat us. When we protect our worth, we create space for healthier relationships. I also understood that healing takes time. Forgiveness is a journey, not a destination. I was not perfect, but I was honest with myself and committed to growing. Sometimes I still think about my parents and sister. I hope they find peace and learn to respect others. But I no longer carry their pain inside me. Instead, I focus on the family I have chosen, the friends who lift me up, the allies who believe in me, and the quiet moments where I feel truly at home. My story is not just about betrayal and loss. It is about resilience, hope, and the power of self-love. To anyone listening who feels small, unseen, or unappreciated, I want to say this. You are worthy. You are enough. And sometimes, the greatest gift you can give yourself is the courage to walk away from anyone who makes you feel less than you are. That is a fortune no one can take from you. As I close this chapter of my life, I feel a deep gratitude not for what I lost, but for what I gained. My real fortune is my freedom, my dignity, and the love I have for myself, and that is a treasure beyond measure.